fish, their position, and how they respond in real time. That's game changing.
Well, hello and welcome everybody to another Sonar Masterclass. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. It's been several months and a lot of stuff's been going on in the sonar space since we last ran one. And I'll tell you what, this is going to be a really exciting episode. So folks, you know the drill if you've been to one of these before. I want you to jump online. I want you to type something into that chat box there so that we can see that you can hear us, because we can't see your faces. So get in there, let us know where you're coming in from, and let us know what you want to know about sonar, because we've got a wizard with the sonar on board tonight. We've got a real treat for you because, of course, in early 2021, Lowrance brought into Australia their active target technology, and we've got a bunch of Australian anglers. You've just seen the American guys. Hopefully that's got your appetite whet. We've got a bunch of top Australian guys now who have got their hands on this gear, and they are starting to kick some goals with it, really make some progress. And one of the guys who is probably having, well, I don't know if he's having the best success, but he's certainly having a lot of success, is Romen Dicovsky. And he's been on these masterclasses before. He's a great presenter, a great mind, great fisho, and knows his sonar back to front. So, folks, I'm going to bring Romen on now and introduce him to those of you who haven't already met him. Romen, welcome aboard. Let me bring you up full size, mate. We don't want you to scale down like that. Welcome aboard, mate. Now, we've got a whole bunch of people here. So, Mark 5 Fish for saying hello. Who have we got? We've got Luke from Tassie. We've got, they're coming up as Dave from Ipswich. We've got Shane from Goulburn. We've got Shane from Kyogle. We've got Eric from Wollongong. Great stuff, guys. Thank you for putting some names and some locations into that search bar for us. It really helps us to know that you can hear us okay. Romen, mate, you have been giving this new technology everything it's got. You've really been putting it through its paces. You've had some great success. So first of all, congratulations on the goals that you kicked in the Pertec Challenge. That was pretty amazing. But I'm not going to dwell on that too much because that was just one event. And you're more than one event. You've been consistently catching quality cod and yellers, and you're using this active target. So really looking forward to a great session tonight, mate.
Yeah, certainly, Ari. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Like you said, question and answers. Get as many questions as you can lined up. We'll try and answer them all. We might not have the time, but we'll get to you at some point, no doubt in the future if we don't get to your questions now. But yeah, active target for me has been probably the biggest thing in fishing for me to look forward to in the last 10 years, I would say at least. It's something that's absolutely blown me away. And the quality and the detail, which we'll touch on throughout this, the videos, the images, and even the stories. And yeah, can't wait to share some things with you.
Well, look, it is really something special, the information that you can get now out of sonar. And this active target, it's been a long time. There's been a lot of anticipation. It's been a long time coming. It's here now. And it's really, for those who have got their hands on a unit and have had the time and the know-how to really start putting it through its paces, they're starting to see some results. Now, mate, I'm looking at your slide deck. There's about, 3 million slides here, I reckon, and a bunch of videos as well. So where would you like to start? Should we just start bringing up some slides and showing some people what you're seeing on your active target, or do you want to see if we've got any questions straight off the bat that we can answer?
Look, there's probably a couple of questions that are already going to come up, so I might want to address a couple of them now, because let's address the elephant in the room, so to speak. So I hear, you see a lot of people saying that live sonar is cheating, or it's like shooting fish in a barrel. One thing that I'd like to say that's definitely a myth. We're going to touch on it as we go in, but for me, it's just another tool, another layer. Technology involved, so does fishing and the fish, and it's just another layer, and I'll explain that as we go through, but I can guarantee you it is not a shoot, see, and catch fish. Definitely not the case. You have to be tuned in to how you control the unit, how you place your cast, your knowledge of the fish. It's just another tool.
Yep. And, it can be very, very frustrating to be able to see fish and not catch them as well. And I think one of the things that strikes me about this technology is I think anglers are starting to come to terms with how to use the technology, but the next step then is understanding what it's telling us. And that's not about the technology, not about the screen resolution or any of that stuff. It's about what are these fish actually doing? It's interpreting that information that you're getting from the sounder, and that's where it starts to get a bit tricky, I think. But over the next few years, I think we're going to learn so much about fish and about fishing that we didn't know until this technology was available. So, mate, I've brought up a question from David Lawson. He's asking, how shallow have you found each mode can go, and what's the best mode for each depth?
Well, for me, I'm a huge fan of the forward mode. So a lot of what you're seeing today is the forward mode, and I use that primarily. I have fished the other modes, but for me, I would say it's at least 90% forward mode. So for me, forward mode can stretch out to as far as 15, 20, 30 meters in some instances, and seeing the fish come in, they do change in terms of their look from the large distance into the closer distance, and we'll explain that as we go through the various screenshots. But in essence, as far as you want, I mean, up to a point, beyond 30 meters, it does get a little bit hazy depending on the depth. But in terms of depth, I like to utilize the forward mode in pretty much any depth. But as soon as you go about 2 meters or 3 meters, you do start to lose a little bit if you don't understand the ratio aspect. So for me, I like to use a 3-in-1 ratio. So let's just say 30 meters forward and go 10 meters down, and then you get a best overall aspect of the image. So for me, it's forward pretty much all the way, but your down view does go out quite wide. So yes, it goes down like a cone underneath your boat like this, but you do actually get quite a bit of length on either end. So 8 meters, 10 meters, so to speak, in terms of your wide range. So pretty much any depth. If you're looking, you're super shallow though, your scout mode is definitely what you want. So when you're fishing the shallow flats, if you're fishing a sandbar, if you're fishing salt, or fishing anything that's flat, I tend to put scout mode on when I'm fishing anywhere from 1 meter to 3 meters. But I get so much out of my forward mode, and we'll get onto the reasons why and the images throughout this whole session.
Okay, now we've got a question from Kyle about whether this is going to be available as a replay. Kyle, it will be available. Each of these masterclasses gets uploaded to Lawrence's YouTube. It gets uploaded to my YouTube and to my website as well. So there are plenty of places you'll be able to see the replay if you can't stick around for the whole thing. I think we're probably going to go for a bit of a long session tonight because there's going to be a lot of interest in this particular unit. So question from Kyle also about the monkey in the room. Why can't Australia get a good solid flow of units in stock?
Oh, that's out of my pay range, I'm afraid, mate. I'm the fisherman. I'm not in the marketing team or any of the back scene sort of stuff. So I know that a lot are getting made. I dare say COVID is probably going to be one of the big problems. But yeah, it's not my role, I'm afraid.
I can tell you that globally, this is something that we're going to see across the board globally in so many areas. If you've tried to buy a vehicle lately, if you've tried to buy a boat, any kind of electronics, you can't buy a Minn Kota at the moment. One of my mates just recently bought the last Suzuki 80 horsepower 4-stroke in the country. And it's because during COVID, people's buying habits changed, and believe it or not, people were cashed up with all the government spending that went on. And so they're buying different things, and essentially the factories are not able to scale up fast enough to manufacture to the new demand. So it's going to be an ongoing problem, unfortunately, not just for sonar. It's going to be an ongoing problem for just about anything you can think about. Building materials are at a premium at the moment. So all right, we've got questions coming up now, guys. I will say I'm going to bring the questions up as fast as I can, but they sort of scroll through in front of us sometimes before we can get to them. So if your question doesn't get asked, please don't be afraid to put it up again. We'll try and get through all of them. We do miss them occasionally. So who have we got here? We've got Patty from Chinchilla, Queensland. So I can't read that. Can you read that, Roman?
No.
Carbon 16 or Live 12, best quality screen for viewing. Carbon 16 or Live 12?
Well, the HDS screen in general, so in terms of the live unit, the most recent unit, are the clearest units in terms of their vision, and really good for the sun glare as well. So HDS Live for me is definitely going to be the better screen if you're comparing the two. Not saying that the Carbon's not going to be good. It's just the HDS Live is a nicer screen.
All right. I'm just scrolling through the questions here. Shortages and nasty in the building industry. All right, I think we're through the questions. Lots of comments, and that's great. So keep interacting with us, guys. Oh, we do have another question here from Luke. So Luke's question is about the performance looking back into a trolling spread for, say, tuna. How would your active target go looking into a trolling spread?
I'm a freshwater fisher, so I can't comment too much on that. I know that it's performing very well in the salt, and there are some really quality stuff from Steve White out there in the salt, but I'm not too sure about the tuna aspect. I know that it picks up sharks fantastic. In terms of moving, however, if I'm traveling where I fish at a steady speed, so more of what you would normally generally sound your side scan, I can still get quite clear images just by moving, and I often will be just putting my my Lowrance Ghost in auto function, so I'll be traveling and then I'll just be adjusting my pole as I go, and I don't have any issues in that aspect in forward mode. So yeah, part answer, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I guess to throw a little bit extra in there, my guess would be that if you're trolling for tuna, you're generally moving at reasonable speed, and you usually have your spread, within the turbulence of the of the boat. There's lots of waves and lots of wash and that kind of stuff, and I suspect that the sonar may get a bit messy shooting through all of that. That's my guess, but I'm not speaking from experience. It's just my thoughts. Grant's got a question. Is it worth running a separate battery just for the active target and the sounders?
I mean, you've got to have capacity in your battery anyway. But for me, to give an example, I ran a 75 amp hour and do run a 75 amp hour lithium for my HDS 12, also the active target, and then some basic electronics as well that don't draw too much power. And I don't have an issue being out there all day. So from memory, I think it's about 3 amps an hour. You're talking about active target drains, which is quite similar to a HDS 12. So yeah, I would. It really depends on the electronics on your boat and how things are wired, whether you're getting interference of certain things that you got plugged in there. But for me, I didn't have any issues running it with the sounder as well. So I'm just a bit frozen, Greg, so I'm going to go out and back in, so don't be too worried if I leave you in a second. But
no worries. Yep. Your audio is coming through fine. So folks, while Roman's doing that, just so that you understand how the system works, it basically, if the signal's not strong enough, here we go, he's back. If the signal's not strong enough, it'll dumb down the video first, but the audio is coming through crystal clear, so we can hear you okay. All right, let's have a look. We've got a few more questions come up, so let's see what else we've got here. Do you need to run the sound on a separate battery? I seem to be getting some interference lines coming through.
I just touched on that. I don't. I mean, I run mine on the same as my my sounder in general. I mean, if you want to try and isolate that problem, I would first check to see if that is the issue and run it on a separate battery if you've got that capability first off. But yeah, a little bit of trial and error. Might try grounding your unit as well. So your black box, it does come with a ground, so you ground that, and you might find that may clear up your screen. But I don't have mine grounded. I've got all my cabling running up one gunnel of the boat, so all my cabling is essentially touching. I'm running it on a battery which has a HDS and some other equipment on it as well, and I'm not getting interference. So I think it just really depends on your boat. So just trial and error, pull things off and see what happens.
Okay, cool. And as you'll see in just a minute, we're going to bring up some screenshots and we're going to bring up some video. You'll see what Roman means when he says he's not having any interference problems. So another question here. So how do you find using your transducer out to the side as opposed to using it up the front?
A bit confused on what that actually means, if you want to elaborate, but just to touch on how I have mine set up. I have mine at the front of the boat, and I'm using a pole setup. I haven't set it up on the back. I do have capability for that, but I like to be up the front of the bow, controlling my pole with my hand, and also fishing up the front primarily. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, just pop it in the comment.
Yep. Any use to watch a cod come up for a surface bite? I think we might see some of that in due course.
Well, I can tell you what, I have posted videos of my electric just under the surface of the water, and I can clearly see the blades turning. So having a fish follow yourself all the way, or follow your lure all the way to the top, I don't think will be a problem. So in certain instances, I think you'll be able to get a surface strike quite easily.
Sounds like Chad might know you personally, mate, by the looks of that comment.
I haven't seen the comment. I can only see half of them, so maybe I'm glad.
Okay. He's asking what music you listen to while you're fishing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Fish sound.
Why is the detail on side scan better when you're moving compared to when you're spot locked?
On the side scan, well, it's just like sonar in general. If you're sitting still and you're not moving, you're getting a repeat of the same image. So as you're moving over the top of it, you're getting fresh ground, so you're passing over that object. So it's very similar to 2D sonar in that aspect.
Yep. Question about the pole setup. So what pole do you use, and will having the pole on the same side as the electric affect the quality of your image?
I'm using a custom pole. I've got a Rob Paint Engineering bracket and mount, and it essentially is pretty free in the hand, how Rob's mounts are. And having it right next to my electric doesn't cause too much of a problem. I have Lowrance Ghost, so there's barely any or no interference in the Ghost in itself. I haven't run it with any other electrics, but from what I've heard, there's no issues whatsoever.
All right. Question about the Live 16S, which is asking for an update. Can you tell me what, or if there is anything new in the update?
Okay, so if you're talking about the active target update, so a recent update was put on the website where there was a issue with the yellow wire, so the shutdown of the wire. So there has been an update in that aspect. And the update in itself is for the transducer as well as the HDS Live or the FS. So you need to update both. They're out there. So when you go into Lowrance.com, you'll have your support area. Click on that, go down to your updates, and then you'll have a active target update, and that's where your transducer is, and then obviously select your applicable sounder for the sounder update.
Excellent. All right. Question about whether the unit is any good for big trout, mate.
Well, I've seen trout out at Gugong. There are trout there, and I can see them high in the water column. I'm not actively targeting them, so I'm not getting obviously the images that I want from them. They're sitting very high in the water column, but I don't have any questions that it's going to be good for trout. You're picking up redfin perch, which are as big as that, and you can actually tell what a little to a medium to a large golden redfin perch looks like, let alone a small golden perch, medium golden perch, and a big golden perch, and of course the cod. So yeah, I don't think it has any issues. The one thing that I'll just also mention, when you're seeing the video off the SD cards that people are filming onto, you're not actually seeing the full quality of what's on the screen. So you'll have a look, if you've seen my page, some videos of me just taking some off-the-cuff videos of the sounder screen with screen glare from the sun, and you'll see that the redfin perch come out so crisp and so contrasting against each other, and you'll see some images showing that. But when you're seeing it on the recording, it's going to blow you away on how clear it is on the screen. So you can tell those minute details. So in a long-winded answer, yes, trout, no problem.
And on that note, mate, I'm going to throw a message out here for the Lowrance engineers, because I'm sure they'll be listening. What I'd like to see in the next version that comes out is I'd like to be able to see the red fins on the red fin. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
All right. So Dave's asking, what are the benefits of using a pole for your transducer?
The benefits for me are the ability to cast out to where you want to be. And if you're spot locked, for example, if you have it on your electric motor, it's going to be continuously turning. So you're going to lose that ability to be able to track your lure in. Because one of the big things with active target and live sonar in general is tracking those fish when they're coming in. Because the cone angle is not that large. It's only about 18 degrees. So you need to be able to track those fish in. So that's the biggest draw card of having it on a pole. If you want to track those fish to come into the boat, you can independently move that with one hand, cast with the other hand. And it's actually, you've got to be very coordinated to effectively use this sort of technology, because there's so much going on. And then you've got to think about what the fish are doing and the conditions. So when I was touching on before that it's not, shooting fish in a barrel and cheating, that's what I mean. It's very involved, and that's one of the big reasons is having an independent pole will give you a heads up of more than anything.
Yeah. Great question here from Luke Rainsford. He's asking whether you're able to identify specific species by the group or by the movement on the screen.
Yeah, easily. So I've been using this from about early January up until now, fishing Googong Dam primarily, the lakes around Canberra, targeting Murray cod, golden perch, redfin, and I can tell you what, I can easily tell what species, generally what size they are as well. And it's just been an absolute game changer in terms of being able to understand how the fish live together and how the fish, native fish, Murray cod, golden perch, even the redfin live in harmony 90% of the time. They live together. They don't get spooked by each other. I've been able to harness that very early on in the piece, and we're going to see footage of that, and we'll explain more as we go.
Excellent. So a question from David Lawson here about whether there's going to be spare parts available. I'm not sure that we're qualified to answer that one, David. That's probably one more for the Lowrance crew. Might be a question you could post on their Facebook page or message them if you've got specific questions. But I'd imagine there'd have to be a supply of parts available. You wouldn't bring a product onto the market without having any spare parts. But just, I'm cautious about saying that just because I know that everything is in short supply at the moment, difficult to get. So.
Yeah.
A question from Nathan coming up on the screen now. He says his live target flickers and he's tried adjusting the contrast and the noise reduction, and it seems to flash a bit. How can he fix it?
Well, there's a few things to check. First of all, I would check wiring, see that you have the right gauge of wiring, how far your wiring actually traverses through your boat as well, depending on the gauge. Also, if you have any interference from any other cables that are touching, obviously, the active target cable wherever it's running to the boat, having it grounded. There is a grounding, as I've mentioned previously. You could try that as well. And obviously, if you have anything else running off your actual battery that's powering your active target too. So when screens generally flicker with sonar, that generally means low voltage. So you can go in and have a look to see what voltage is getting read from your overlay option as well. So yeah, there's a few things to look into there. If you're talking pulsing rather than flickering, it can just be the different frequencies or the same frequency running off a different sounder. So yeah, if you want to fling me a message or a short video, I can answer that, just be more specific to your actual question.
Excellent. And a really good question coming through here from Darcy. Love this one, mate. So using the active target technology, have you been able to find a technique that gets a bite when the cod are shut down, including things like using scents and different retrieves and that sort of thing?
Well, yes, definitely. You know, I've had many theories over the last 5-7 years when I've been implementing my vertical game on Murray cod, and I can definitely tell when fish, just by the way they're swimming into your lure, because a lot of the times they actually swim into your lure and then they turn away at the last second, or they just hover around and come in for a look. But you can generally tell by the speed that they're coming into your lure whether they're going to bite or not. But scents do come into play. And that's even before live sonar technology. But yes, it's very obvious. And when you're out on the water for, you know, the time that I am focusing on those little minute nuances, yes, it's easily, you can easily pick it up. It's that detailed. You can pick up bubbles, individual bubbles coming up on active target, and literally say, oh, there's bubbles coming up. Look just in front of the boat 3 meters away, you'll see bubbles. I've done that countless times and people can't believe me.
I was watching one of your videos the other day, mate, and I could see the lure. That's not unusual. We're used to that, but I could see the FG knot where your leader was attached to your line. Yeah, that's how precise it is. So pretty amazing stuff. David's got a question about whether Lowrance has anything like Helm.
Helm. I'm not too sure what Helm is, so I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if that's an autopilot or something like that. Perhaps, David, if you'd just like to come back to us with a bit more information, it's obviously something that we're not so familiar with. Question here about an Elite TI2 3-in-1 transducer. Can you use the same transducer in the Elite FS?
Sorry, for the Elite FS.
Yeah.
The Elite FS is a 3-in-1, so yes, you can use the active imaging.
Should work okay. Yep. Okay. Excellent. All right. So look, the questions have slowed down a bit, mate, and so I reckon it's a great time for us to bring up one of your videos or some of your slides. Where would you like to start on that, mate?
Go lucky dip, mate.
Do lucky dip. All right. Let me bring up something like this. Let's put us a little bit down here so that we can see the screen a bit better, and let me see if I can actually play this. And you can perhaps give us a commentary, mate.
Cool, mate. So this is just my lure that's jigging in the middle of the screen there, and you've got golden perch, a school of golden perch that are mixed in with some redfin perch, and you can see me just there hooking up. You see the bubble trail at the top? That's how clear the active target is. You get the bubbles, even with a fish on their strike, and me catching the golden perch coming up. This fish, from memory, was only in the mid 40-centimetre range, and finding those school fish, being able to judge their sizes in the detail. And if you look closely there, you can actually see the fins of the fish as well when they're swimming. So once they're in the right angle of the beam, you can see the separation of the fins, and you can tell that these fish are sitting on just a little bit of a tree there. And yeah, essentially that's that.
Excellent. All right. That video is just about run its course, so let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so you've got a Murray cod here that's just cruising. You've got a school of redfin perch directly underneath the boat, which is that little white line. And this fish is just cruising around the redfin school, and you'll see my lure from memory pop in the screen soon. Yep, there you go, coming down the right. And you'll see the redfin perch start rising on the lure, and you can see there will be the cod swimming into the redfin perch. And when I was saying previously that the redfin and the cod and the yellows live together in harmony, that's an example. Those redfin are chasing my lure, and that cod's just swimming all around them. And this cod was actually stalking these fish. And this was probably the first time that I realized that using active target, that I can see the cod sitting there stalking these fish for minutes on end, and then started filming and dropped my lure down, and then you saw what happened. And those redfin and the cod, they hang around each other a lot. And same thing with the golden perch. So learning those little nuances is really the biggest thing utilizing this technology.
And quite amazing to see, when the lure was first dropped down, you could see what looked like a flat bottom, and then all these redfin just rose up, seemingly out of the sediment, just appeared and swarmed around the lure. So quite amazing to see. It's stuff that we wouldn't have seen without this live sonar. So tremendous. We've got a question that's come through from Chris, and he's asking, what improvements to the software would you like to see?
Well, one thing for sure is straight out of the box and first run at this detailed sonar. I think it's absolutely fantastic for the first product. For me, it would be a little bit of the noise reduction on the opposing sonars and the sonar pings. But aside from that, I haven't had any issues with anything else. I know with the filming of the footage that the gold cards in the SD cards that you plug in tend to run a little bit better, but I think that's actually a card thing, not an actual
faster cards. Yeah.
So yeah, yep. That's essentially all that I've really noticed.
All right, let's go back and have another look at some more video footage, mate. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Let me just bring us back up on the screen. There we go. Okay,
so we've got another school of redfin perch here in the forward mode. You can see a little bit of a flicker there, and that's the 3-in-1 sounder. I mean the 3-in-1 transducer throwing those pings. So it's still actually quite clear. It's just a little bit of a disturbance there. And this is on a little bit of a sloping bank. So as it slopes into the shallow water, it does get a little bit more fuzzy in the distance, but we're talking about 22 meters from memory in this one here. So you've got a school of redfin perch just slowly swimming up from the bottom, my lure dropping down. And as Greg alluded to, you can see the leader knot here, and it's not an FG, sorry to correct you, Greg. It's just It's just an improved Albright knot essentially. And the one thing that I want to highlight here as well is you can see the knot, you can see the line above the knot, but you can't see the fluorocarbon. So fluorocarbon, fish can't see fluorocarbon. Well, I can tell you what, active target can't either. So that's another aspect which has been pretty clear and pretty awesome to see, that you can't see that fluorocarbon. Those fish are those schooled golden perch just hovering on the lure. They're not committing. And this is what you see a lot of. 99% of the time you'll have fish that are not going to eat your lure, but they'll be there looking at it, playing with it, sniffing it, but not touching it. So yes, you can get frustrated, and that's one of the scenarios here.
Yeah, cool. Got a couple of questions come up. I might just bring them up while we're at this point. So Paul Langley's asking about, he's heard that active target can be run off up to 24 volts. Is there any gain in clarity by running him off the 24-volt Lecky batteries versus traditional 12-volt?
Well, I've heard the same. I haven't actually heard anyone getting a better reading out of it. So I can't comment because I haven't actually done that myself. I'm running it off 12-volt. And I actually was running it off a 24-volt setup, but I have a 24 to 12-volt converter as well. So it's converting down to 12 volts. So I can't really comment too much, but I have heard around the traps that it doesn't make too much of a difference.
Okay. Got a few more questions come through, so we might knock these over before we go back to video. So do you think having the screen gridded would help more, or do you find that it's easy to use as far as placing your lure where the fish is?
For me, it's no help at all. I think it just clutters the screen. I'm well in tune with my sonar in general, but for people that are new to it and want to understand the distances from where your boat is in relation to the lure is and all that sort of stuff, then it could help you. But for me, it doesn't help me at all. It just clutters the screen.
Is it one of those things that as you use it more, you just start to get a bit of a feel and a bit of a sense without needing to have it sort of graphically represented on your screen?
Yeah, it is one of those things. Plus, it does have your indicators of 1 meter, 5 meters, 6 meters above and along the side as well going down. So as long as you're inclined to measure with your eyes, you don't really need a grid.
Okay. What about targeting fish? Matthew Barry's asking, do you always target fish with the active target, or do you just target structure sometimes in the hope that there might be fish in there? I think, in other words, the question is, if you don't, and reading between the lines, if you don't see fish in structure, does that mean it's not worth fishing there?
No, that's a great question, and I was going to bring that up. So I do both. So let's just say I get on the water, turn on my 3-in-1, so my side scan and my traditional sonar, and I'm tracking and I'm having a look for fish. I'll find what I like, either fish or structure, and then I'll turn on my active target. I'll turn off my 3-in-1 and my other transducers, and then I'm going to be searching in that area. Often what you'll find is when fish are sitting really tight up against structure or in a shadow, you're not going to see them. As soon as they start moving off, that's when they really stick out like, you know what? And yeah, it's a mixture of the two, but generally you see that many fish with active target. No matter which bank I go to, I will see fish, and I'll see many big cod, many golden perch, and a million redfin, like literally nowhere. Doesn't matter where I go. You see that many fish in that detail that you'll bring them off the bottom, similar to that video you saw of those redfin around the Murray cod. So yeah, column A and column B.
Excellent. So a question here about, what about a back to basics fishing as a general concept? So I think Ganesh is asking whether we might be interested in doing some basic fishing type live streams instead of sonar, which might be a possibility. But this particular series obviously is presented by Lowrance and by Simrad and Navico. So we are a bit focused on sonar here, but a back to basics fishing series, that could work. Question about dam fishing. Are you able to tell the difference between cod and carp on the active target?
Yes. It took a little bit getting used to. Luckily, there's no carp in Gugong Dam, so I have gone to other waterways here which have carp in it. It's more of a question of confusing carp with golden perch to a degree, but once you see those fish individually, then you'll learn the depth of the fish. So it's like a dinner plate. You know, the golden perch are like a football, and a dinner plate, those big ones, and the carp are long and slender. And carp move a lot more, so they'll create a lot more squiggly lines on your screen when we're talking 2D. But in the 3D, you can tell the size of the tail in a lot of the aspect as well. So yes, it does. It takes a bit of getting used to if you're new to it, but you definitely can do it.
Excellent. All right, another question coming through here that I suspect might be one of your mates here, mate. So is active target best used with Gamoku rods? Just asking for a mate.
Well, for my application, yes, because I love my vertical game. And yes.
All right. I think that's it for the questions. Does it pick up pairs was the other one that came up?
Pairs of cod, yes, definitely.
All right. No worries. Let's go back and have another look at the videos, mate, because we've got plenty to keep us going for some hours, I suspect. But anyway, let's play this one. You can tell us what's going on here.
It's very similar to the previous video. So you've got the 3-in-1 transducer going. So that's the interference that you're seeing. Golden perch coming off this tree. And these are quite small golden perch mixed in with a couple larger ones. And then you've got a heap of redfin perch coming up from the bottom. So those more specky returns are your smaller redfin perch, and the ones that look a little bit more like a blob that are moving through are your smaller golden perch mixed in with a couple bigger golden perch. So and then you've got some bubbles coming up as well. So you've got some little marks coming up to the surface right now, and they're bubbles that those fish are created. So it just shows you the clarity you're getting out of those smaller fish, your medium fish, and then you've also got the bubble trail. And then if you're looking up forward, like I was saying before, as it gets shallower, it does start to peter out a little bit, so it can appear a little bit fuzzy, but fish moving in that distance, which you can see at the moment, are a school of fish. I've just turned the pole. You can see the fish in the furthest point there in the shallow, and you can still make them out. You can't really tell what they are until they get a little bit closer, but in the middle of the screen now, you could see golden perch appear. I'm moving it a lot, as you can see, but my lure's just jigging in front of those fish. This is just showcasing the minute movements. Because it is an 18-degree cone, just moving it a little bit can get rid of that tree completely, and now you've just essentially got black water, so fish that are not sitting on structure, but there is structure there. You just have to be able to distinguish the small movements to see what you want to see.
Roman, I'm just going to go back partway through that video and see if I can find the part that I'm thinking of. These lines that we see on the sound here, is that where the beams are intersecting, the various beams of the transducer?
That's correct. So there's many beams coming off from the transducer, and they're just joins.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. All right. Got a couple more questions coming up, so let's bring you back up on the full screen and bring up a couple of the questions. So a question about the trout. Can we just clarify whether he's picking up trout? He's using it in Rotorua lakes in New Zealand with great results. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I think the answer was, Pat, yes, definitely able to pick up trout on the active target. So, John Albrecht, what are the best maps to install on the Lowrance 12 Live?
Well, I've got the C maps, so contour C maps, and I find them absolutely fantastic. I haven't used the Navionics cards in the newer units, so I can't comment on them, but the C maps are fantastic maps.
What application does the active target have in deeper water? So, and the question is specifically about baits of schools of bait fish and tuna specifically.
Okay, for me, I'm only fishing the freshwater and dams primarily, so I'm mainly targeting anywhere from 1 metre to about 20 metres on average in depth. I have pushed it out a little bit deeper to about 25. I have seen plenty of ground deeper than that, about your 30 to 35 metre mark, but I don't fish that deep unless the fish are there, and that's very seldom, so I can't comment too much on that. And in terms of the salt stuff, again, I'm not out there on the salt, so I'm not going to comment too much on that, except for what I've seen. And like I said, there's some fantastic results in the salt, and Nick White and the other blokes doing a bit more in the salt probably be the best ask.
Yeah, and we've got a few saltwater masterclasses coming up over the next few months as well. I think Lee Rayner's going to do a snapper one for us a bit later on in the year, so you might get a bit more information out of that as well if you haven't already bought your unit by then and figured it out for yourself. So let's have a look at what else we've got here. So Mark McKay, will you be able to colour the bottom differently so the fish show up better if they're on hard bottom? This is a feature that Garmin has.
So from memory, there's 6 color palettes. That's definitely going to be something that will be touched on in updates to come. More color palettes, but I haven't. There's no option to do that I'm aware of. But I dare say there will be something down the line. But there are different color palettes which do contrast and make it come out a little bit differently. So I'll touch on that once we have the videos to show you. But in terms of color changes, no, not to my knowledge.
Okay, cool. Great question from Adam Taylor. How long do you stay on a spot with fish until you decide to move on? And this is a very relevant question because with this new technology, of course, you can see a lot of fish. So, if they're not biting, do you stick around and fish them, or do you move on and find another fish?
Early on in the piece, I stuck around a bit too long on some instances, but that's mainly to learn what the fish are doing, how they're moving. It really depends on the conditions as well. So let's just throw sonar out of the window for a second. I've learnt the fish's behaviour from walking the banks, spending all those years to understand what the fish do. This is more so confirming it, and then understanding the behaviours of the fish, and then having that layer of active target and technology there to show you what they're doing. So it's like anything. Once you see it, you put in a pattern. Once you have a pattern, then you understand their movements. So I've spent hours on spots just to learn what the fish are doing and how they're reacting to my lures or how they're just free swimming. So there's a lot in there to unpack. But yes, you can spend a lot of time there to learn. That doesn't mean you're going to catch those fish, because most of the fish you see or follow your lure, you can't catch anyway. So, yeah, you can stay there as long as you like, or you can move on and find more fish. And that's what I'm doing a lot of currently is I'll find fish that don't seem active, and then I'll just keep moving and moving and moving and find what I want to see in that fish and that behaviour.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's one of those things that it varies from person to person, doesn't it? I know some people will say if a fish is there, it's catchable, so just keep at it, figure it out. And others will say, well, if it's sulking around on the bottom, you've put a lure in front of it a few times, it's not going to take it, and there's plenty of other fish in the lake, why would you stick around? So a little bit of horses for courses, give it a try, see what works. Maybe you want to stick around, maybe you want, if it's a big fish, maybe you'll stick around for a while, if it's an active fish or not an active fish, maybe you won't. Anyway, Nathan's asking us about the Hook 7, mate. Do you know much about the Hook 7s, and are they worth the money?
The Hook Reveals or the older generation Hook 7s. If it's the older generation Hook 7s, they're a good plug-in and play unit. They're a basic unit. The Hook Reveals are a little bit more in tune with some of the modern features of the higher end units. But if you're looking just as a plug-in and play system without too much functionality change, then they're a good unit for yourself. But if you're somebody who wants to progress with your fishing and understand and utilize the top end features and the new technology, that's when you'll move on to your Elite FS and your HDS and so forth.
Yeah. All right, question here about big redfin. When you sound a big redfin school in Googong, do you fish it or do you move on?
I love fishing redfin schools because that's where the cod love to live, and that's where the yellow golden perch like to live. So it's more so what I'm targeting at that specific time. But I will often stop on a redfin school, get them going to get those cod a bit more active, depending on the conditions. So yes, I do stop for redfin, and moving into this time of year where it's getting colder, the redfin start to be solo creatures or paired up as well. So yes, you can pick them up, and yes, I will stop if it's a big redfin because they taste brilliant.
All right. Steve Cato's asked whether we're going to have a replay of this. Yes, Steve, we will, mate. It'll be on both the Lowrance and the Doc Lures YouTube channels, so you'll be able to find it there because you missed the start. This is a great question. I love this one. So Andrew Kalish is asking, what are you looking for that tells you that a big cod might be catchable? So when you're looking at it on your sonar, what are the characteristics? What are the things? What are the traits? What are the movements that would say to you, this fish is going to be, you know, it's likely to take a lure?
It depends on the type of year, time of year, but at the moment, with it being so cool, it's just seeing the immediate reaction of that fish. So often you'll get fish that will come in and just slowly come into your lure. The ones that come charging at it like a Comanche helicopter with their nose down and their tail in the air, that's the reaction that I like to see. So fish that are sitting lower in the water column, hugging the bottom a bit more, they're feeding, they're the ones that I'll stick out for a little bit longer. Or if they're actually creating a bit of a pattern of where they're swimming, because a lot of these fish don't sit still. So if they're circling and creating like a little course, so they'll go from A to B to C and come back and they're patrolling, that's when I'll likely stick around, because that's that fish's current area, and then you can try and intercept that fish. And one of the last fish I actually caught, the big fish, I had the fish come in towards me and it acted just like those other ones that would not bite. It would come in, look at my lure, swim away. But then I noticed that that particular fish started swimming up to a tree. So I cast past that tree and risked it for the biscuit, because I was going to lose my lure or catch this fish. And then as soon as I brought it in on a different angle and hopped over that tree, that fish just grabbed it. So it really depends, but it's that initial movement of the big fish.
Excellent. We've still got more questions coming through, mate, but I think we might just take a bit of a break and give your voice a little bit of rest, and maybe put up a video again of some of the active sonar. So let me get myself organised at the control panel here. Let's have a look and see what's going on the screen here.
Okay, so you've got a fish coming in in the distance, so that's about 15 meters. So you've got a big fish moving on in. Obviously, you've got a tree right in the middle there. You've got a couple, or actually more than a couple, 3 fish coming in directly underneath the boat. My lure's there as well. And then you've got a slightly bigger one sitting up high. So looking at that, that could be a decent size Murray cod. And you've got the golden perch, which are going down towards the bottom to my lure now. And then in the distance, you've got some more fish that are just appearing, so you can see them more as a little bit of a blob. And it's essentially just jigging the lure. Actually, this was a friend of mine, actually. It wasn't me. That was actually targeting these fish while I had a big cod in the net. So this was the cod that won the Pertec that's sitting above in the net just after I caught it, and he's trying to catch these golden perch and these other cod which are circling as well, because there was multiple cod in that area. So that's just a general video of about 6 meters in depth, about 22 or 21 meters out, and just seeing those bigger predatory fish swim on in. And you can see how slowly that fish is coming in. So a fish coming in that slow generally is not going to tickle my fancy. Usually they come in a lot quicker if they're really, really in tune with wanting to eat your lure.
And you can see the tail on that fish going from side to side. It's just amazing clarity, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And like I said, it's even better on the screen in front of you.
So while we're watching this, it's got a little bit longer to go. Let's maybe answer a couple more of the questions that come up. So Jesse Wyden has asked, what's the maximum depth that you've used your active target in?
Targeting fish 25 meters. But like I said, I don't really fish much deeper than that. In going into winter, when it gets a bit colder, some of those fish will sit deeper, so I may get a chance to do that. But generally, my happy medium is anywhere from 8 meters to your 14-meter range.
Okay. And Luke Mack is asking, do you think the pings from your live and 3-in-1 transducer ever affect the fish? That's a great question.
Well, I think fish are so in tune, so I think that your sonar pings do, but I don't think it affects them as much as people say it does. And, you know, being active target and maybe giving off a slightly different ping, they're not as used to it, but I can tell you what, they know you're there. You can be as quiet as a mouse, but when they're really, really sensitive, they know you're there, so you can see their reactions from 20 meters away.
Mm. And it varies a little bit on species and on the day as well. I know there's plenty of bass fishers will tell you, the best way to drag bass away from structure and out into deeper water is to move over them on your electric motor with the sounder running, and they'll follow the pings out. The whole school will actually follow the boat out into deeper water. So it depends a little bit on the species and whether they're an inquisitive species or a shy one, and on their mood on the day, I suspect. But obviously these fish, they're getting pinged by multiple transducers and they're not in a hurry to go away.
Yeah, and in that clip that you just played there, there's a big cod that moved on in. This was the cod that was along with that other big 115 centimetre cod that I caught in the Pertec. And this was the one my mate was trying to catch while it was still sitting in the net, and it's just gone out of the picture. But you can see golden perch as well directly underneath the boat there. And when I say directly underneath, at the top of the screen, you got half a little bit of a sun icon. That is the sounder beam from obviously the pole. And the forward range actually gives you a couple meters behind the boat as well. So when I say directly underneath the boat, it can actually mean behind the boat. But yeah, bit of orientation info there for you.
So yeah, another question from Mark here. He's asking about whether you change your lure size if you notice larger redfin on the active target compared to smaller redfin when they're being hunted by cod.
Yes, so if I want to catch a bigger redfin, I'll change to a bigger lipless crankbait and get it to the bottom faster, because those bigger redfin tend to sit at the bottom of the school. But in terms of Murray cod, you don't need to go too big. Cod will eat anything. Elephants eat peanuts. That's the classic saying, and I've experienced that many, many times. So it's more so getting your lure to the bottom faster. If you want to get past those smaller redfin that will rise up in the water column, get a heavier lure to get down there. That's why I love the Rapala Rip and Wraps and the 70 mil. They're not a huge lure, but they have a big presence in the water. They get down to the bottom fast, and that's what I generally look for when I vertically jig.
I had a slightly different interpretation of that question, Roman, and my take on it was that Mark was asking, are you matching the size of your lure to the size of the redfin if the redfin are the food of the cod? So if you notice larger redfin, do you switch up to a larger lure size to try and attract more cod?
It's more so the pattern for me. So
right.
Yes, I'm trying to match those fish, but you're not going to find a lipless crankbait out there that's 50 centimetres long, sort of thing.
Yep. Cool. All right, let's go back because we've got plenty more video. We've got some slides to still go through. So let's bring those up again and see what you've got for us this time, mate.
Okay, again, lure just dropping down directly underneath the boat. Tree in front, about 10 metres. So something is going to happen here. I've obviously brought this in to show you something. I just can't remember what this one is yet.
It's terrible when you're catching so many fish, mate. You can't remember what's going on.
That's cool. That's a fish that moved off the tree. So you can see this fish slowly coming in. It's moving in really slowly and creeping. And it's just showing you that I'm going to adjust the pole here from memory. You can see that fish is just coming in and out of the beam. So again, I talked about the beam being 18 degrees. So you need to be able to track these fish in and understanding what fish look like, just getting a little bit of them in the edge of the beam. This is what's happening here. So you've got a fish that's moved off that tree that was in 10 meters in front of me. It's slowly made its way to me. It's knows the lure's there. And this is actually the one that I catch from memory too. So you should see a hook up right now. Yep, there you go. And I caught this golden perch, and you can see the other golden perch down below. So my nephew and my niece were out with me this day, and they're jigging those smaller golden perch on the bottom, and I saw this one hovering high in the water column, and that's where I was able to throw my lure out in front of the boat, not vertical, and actually get that fish to come in and catch him. So.
Excellent. Now, there's a question that's come up from Kyle. I'm going to bring it up. One of our other listeners has answered it already, but just for those, just so that everyone can see it, basically. So Kyle was asking if there's an option to turn on a grid so that you can gauge the range of the fish that you can see. Garmin has that option. I think we talked about that earlier. So it is possible. Roman, your preference is not to turn it on because you just find it clutters the screen too much. Yeah,
and once you see a big cod and understand what they look like, it's a game of centimeters or inches after that. A big cod has a big presence, but yes, if you want to try and gauge the size of the fish in relation to the depth and the distance that you're fishing, yes, you can get a good judge of the size of it by the grids.
Okay. All right, let's play another video.
Okay, so again, in forward mode, we've got a golden perch that's just hovering off the bottom. There's a heap of redfin perch on the bottom. They're merged on the bottom, and you should see them rise up here. But that fish has gone straight down, and there's another golden perch that's just come in from underneath the boat. But there's a heap of redfin perch that are hidden on the bottom there, and you should see them start to rise up shortly if they're actually the ones that are playing the game. But it just goes to show you that the fish that are uptight up against structure on the bottom, and how I was alluding to before, it's really hard to see, but as soon as they move off the bottom or that bit of structure, they do just show up really, really clear. As you can see now, you've got redfin perch, one that's just been caught, but the rest of them just coming up. And there's hundreds of fish down there, but there's only, a handful of the time that are coming up. So that's one of the things that I've really learnt is to focus a lot on the structure, because 9 times out of 10 you will see those fish coming off that structure, even though you didn't sound them up. And now you've got a bigger predatory fish coming in from about your 6 meter mark now, and that's just hovering nice and slow. It's not going to be one that's feeding. You can tell just by looking at the way that's going. If the fish comes into your lure, it may bite your lure, but you can tell straight away that it's just there for a look. It's not really there for a predatory hunt, because look at all those redfin. If it wanted a redfin, that could grab a redfin at any time.
And maybe that's why it's not too hungry, mate. There's plenty of food there for it.
Yeah, and it's paired up with another one that's a little bit smaller as well. But by looking at that one at the top, that is actually quite a good golden perch, which would be probably 50 to 60 centimeter mark. And then it had a smaller one just below it as well.
Excellent. All right, that's got a little bit longer to go. Do you want me to continue on with that, or will we?
We can move on. That's all good. Here, what we have here is, I've taken a screenshot of the depth range. So when you record off active target, you don't actually get the depth and what you're seeing in terms of the numbers. This is a very big Murray cod that's followed me off a rock shelf. And you'll see the footage of this one very soon. And it's another example of how a fish can track in and out of the beam, and how it appears when it comes straight underneath your boat. So if we move on to the next slide there, Greg, it should be the video. Oh, well, that's a clearer image of that fish that's a bit closer to the boat. So in this image, you can actually see the separation of the pectoral fin. You can actually see the tail shape as well. And you can see that pointy nose of the head. So this is a very big Murray cod that's just come in for a look. And we'll have a look at the video part of this now, and you'll get a better sense of what we're seeing in real time with the fish coming in. So that fish is just coming in. It's a little bit blurrier from a distance, but as it comes in to the middle of the beam, it's going to show up very clearly. And this fish does get spooked as my lure comes down, but you can see now that that fish is tracking in, and my lure is coming in down the back, and I'm moving that pole ever so slightly to keep that fish in the beam. Again, it's a narrow beam, so you need to be able to maneuver your transducer at will if you want to try and really entice a fish to eat your lure. My lure is just tracking above that fish now. There we go. This is a really good image right here. It's right in the beam directly underneath the boat. Look at the tail sway, and you'll see my lure coming down, and this fish will turn on it. So my lure is coming down behind it. The fish is turned. You can see the fins again on this fish. Now it's changed its angle, so you don't see it as well. It's completely turned around, and bang, it swum off. So yeah, like I said, you really got to be on your game when you're trying to actively target these fish in forward mode specifically, because you need to be able to track them to get success. Because if you can't see them, then obviously you're not going to get that sense of where your lure is. So yeah, it's just like I said, a tool and a layer to help you. If you don't know how to use it and you're not fluent with it, it's going to be a bit harder for you. But you can still see the fish. But yeah, that's just a good sense of what a big cod looks like coming in from the distance.
Mm. Now, Romen, I had a recent conversation with Steve Morgan, and he mentioned in the context of using active sonar, he was talking about barramundi, but he said when a barramundi turns and comes straight towards the sonar, because of the shape of the head, the sonar, the transducer beam basically gets reflected off in all sorts of different directions, and it can actually completely disappear, and you can think that the fish is gone, but it can still be in the beam. Is that the same with Murray cod? They've got a similar shaped head, that sort of scoop-shaped forehead.
Look, to be honest, I haven't even thought of that aspect, so it may well be. But I think with cod, particularly where I fish, they're a lot wider in girth, so I think that's going to be less of an issue. But it'll be interesting to see actually that when fishing for those thinner profile fish.
So another question from Andrew. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. So he's asking whether you've played with the depth offset settings and whether it's relevant to the pole length.
Haven't touched it.
Right. Short answer.
Yeah.
Makes it very quick and easy. All right, let's have a look at what else you've got on this slide deck, mate, because there's still plenty to go through. So let's bring it up. What's the next one?
All right. So before we play this, Lawrence did actually post the full-length video of this. This is only a short one, so we may miss this one just because it does take a few minutes. But essentially, if we want to actually go to the last half of this, Greg, and I'll explain to you what I'm seeing, it's actually a really good moment, so we shouldn't miss it. So if we just go play, and if you just go back a little bit earlier than that, just go to the 1 minute in. Okay, here we go. Oh, just go back a touch. Okay, here we go. So I'm jigging, and there's a lot going on. I've got 2 rods here. I'm targeting cod and yellow belly, and you've got a really big cod come in and spook that golden perch. But watch this fish as it comes completely in towards you. So its head is coming in towards the transducer. So if we play it here.
Not sure why that stopped playing for us there, but anyway.
Have a look at the pectoral fins and the separation. You can even see the tail, right? You see me get very excited and animated here because it's literally the first time I've seen that with a big fish. And that is just the clarity that you're getting and understanding, like you said, Greg, when that fish does turn in, some barramundi anglers may miss the fish thinking it's not there, but you just understanding the different angles that those fish come in will tell you a large part of the story on how big they are. And that fish has swum straight into this actual tree here. So yeah, I get a little bit excited, but that fish actually had a smaller fish with it as well. It was paired up. This is a golden perch that doesn't take the lure, but you'll see very shortly that I do end up catching a smaller Murray cod, which is around the 80 centimetre mark, and it does appear a lot smaller. So here you've got golden perch up high, you've got redfin perch below, and then you'll see this slightly bigger fish, which you could confuse for a bigger golden perch, but it's actually a smaller Murray cod come up as we speak. And my lure, it will take on the drop. So I'll go free spool in a moment. Fish is just going, yep, I'll have that. And hooked it on the drop. So that's a smaller cod, but you can see the tail thrashing on the way up. That fish is just, directly underneath the boat, and you're getting a really good image of it coming up to the surface. So, I mean, we can essentially stop it there, Greg, but that's just a good example of looking for the fin structure, looking for the angle of where those fish are swimming in from. This is only going to be with time. Videos and screenshots that can help you to understand that. That's the detail you need to look for. Get lost in that detail, because that detail will often determine what you see versus what you can catch.
All right. Shall we keep moving, mate? How's your voice?
Oh, mate, I can talk fishing for hours. Don't worry.
All right, let's play another video.
Okay, so this is my niece and nephew. So this footage hasn't been seen yet, but my niece has never caught a Murray cod. And what you have here is a big fish surrounding a redfin school. And this is only one of the fish that was caught, but we caught multiple fish within 15 minutes of each other. But my niece there in the beanie, furthest in the shot, she's vertically working a Storm SX soft plastic vibe, and she hooks onto a very lovely size Murray cod. And you know, it goes for a bit of a fight, but we've cut this a bit short. But essentially, we were tracking in, we were side scanning, we saw what we saw fish, and then we stopped and deployed the active target, and directly underneath us we found fish. We caught two golden perch in 2 casts or 2 drops, and then Kira's hooked this absolute beast of a cod. She hasn't caught a big fish, so I'm just helping her in here. And as you will see, once we get this one in the net, you know, it's just a fantastic way to introduce kids into fishing. Obviously, having that video game aspect, you know, kids love video games, and they've been able to see the fish before they catch them, and you know, get really enthralled in what's happening. So, as much as this can be perceived as cheating or something shooting fish in a barrel, it's also really good in bringing children and the new generation into fishing as well, because you can see that. And you know, Kira's prime example, catching an absolute beast of a fish. It was just under the meter mark at about 90 centimeters. But yeah, seeing the joy on kids' faces and their amazement of what this technology can do is just an absolute brilliant thing to see.
I think it's also the case, you know, when you've got kids out, and if the fish aren't biting, at least they can see that there's fish there, you know, because they get a bit impatient if they've got no idea. If there's no chance we're going to catch a fish, you can't see anything, you're not catching anything. But at least if there's something on the screen, you can try different things and they can feel confident that there's a chance they're going to catch a fish.
And that excitement just there just absolutely kills it. So, yeah, and like you said, I mean, I've never had so much fun not catching fish. It's just, I love being out there for those long days and just seeing how the fish react and, you know, how they go about their day essentially. And if we're talking about understanding fish, this is just that total new aspect and level of detail. Like I said, doesn't mean you're going to catch them, but my goodness, it's fun just watching it.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Do you want to keep going with that video, mate, or should we move on? Goes for a bit longer.
I think we should show the viewers this beautiful fish.
Sounds good.
Oh my goodness, this is I told you we saw a nice cod here on your we're going to get all the photos, so don't you worry. Right. Okay. Just get a little bit relaxed then. Look at that pure beautiful fish. So there you go. There's a little snippet of what that fish is. But yeah, you can see kids, big fish, and it doesn't have to be big fish, but just that experience. I think that's just part and parcel of you know, technology these days. You know, people have it on their phones. Incredible things. Having the next level stuff in fishing, I think, is an absolute benefit and bonus.
Good stuff. All right. Now, the questions have slowed down. It may be because people are watching the video. So, folks, don't forget, if you do have questions, to put them up there. I know it's entertaining watching the video, but we are willing to stay here as long as it takes to answer all your questions. And we have got some more screenshots and things to go through. So, where would you like to go from here, mate? On to the next screenshot?
Well, we've got a comparison of forward and down mode. It's about a 48-second video from memory, Greg, and it's a big tree that I'm sounding. Or actually, we'll stop here because this is pretty good. So like I was saying before, the redfin perch come out like really clear, and the screenshots give you a better indication of what you're seeing in real life on the screen. And you can see there, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just keep going. You can see how many redfin perch are showing up really clear. And then in the foreground there in 15 meters, you've got slightly bigger fish coming in. So that's a difference of directly underneath the boat. Opposed to 15 meters, they're a little bit more of a blob, but they do come in a lot clearer from that point in. And if we just go to the next screenshot there, Greg, you can see that there's a golden perch that's sitting off a tree directly underneath the boat. And up in front of you there, you've got a lot of trees. And the one thing about active target that's really, really appealing to me is you can be casting your lure through those trees and actually see it bouncing in and out from those different trees. So it penetrates the trees really, really well. It's not just the detail that you're seeing, but in distance, and this is 21.3 meters, as you can see in distance, you've still got that definition in those trees. And yeah, that's the prime example of not just thinking about what's directly underneath you, but obviously in the forward mode, you've got that ability to see what's ahead of you. So you need to always be thinking if you're trying to utilize this technology to its full potential.
Cool. Right, we have a couple of questions that have come up, mate. So let's take a bit of a deviation and talk about those. So Luke's asking if we've ever noticed whether the pings from the live and the 3-month transducers ever affect the fish.
I think it really depends on the depth of water. I think if you're fishing shallow, I think that they can it can affect the fish. But I've come to the realization that it actually affects it a lot less than first thought. So I had that same thought. People would say, "Oh, turn off your sounder when you cast on the banks for Murray cod. Oh, they're going to be spooky." But I found it to be a little bit on the opposite front. I don't think it affects them to that degree. Yes, I guarantee you it affects them to a degree, but not to the extent that most people think.
I think it's probably fair to say too that on some pretty hard fished waters, there's probably rarely a time when there isn't a transducer pinging above them. So fish probably become a bit accustomed to them and don't necessarily get too concerned about them. Pat's got a question about whether you use a zoom function much.
I've zoomed in a couple times, more so with user error, but you do lose clarity, obviously, when you zoom into things. So I just try and keep my range where I want to see it. That just brings me on to manually setting my depths. I prefer to manually set my depths when I'm fishing in forward mode in terms of the water underneath me, because I find that I want to be utilizing the whole screen as much as possible. So as long as I'm keeping that 3-in-1, sometimes 4-in-1 ratio, 4 being forward and 1 being down, I get a really good sense of clarity utilizing that aspect.
Okay, cool. All right, we might go back to some more screenshots, mate.
This is the one that I was alluding to. So this is a Christmas tree of redfin perch. So the clarity that you're seeing in those individual redfin on the screen is just phenomenal. So I was able to actually form this redfin Christmas tree at will with these fish and get the perfect screenshot. So there's your Christmas present all.
All right.
Here we have a perfect example of golden perch sitting directly below the boat, very, very shallow in reference to my boat. And then looking out forward in about your 12 to 15 meter range, you've got those boulders that are got a lot of shadow to them. So where I was saying before that fish might be hiding, that black parts of those shadows, where fish might be hiding in that. So just maneuvering yourself around, adjusting your pole, trying to find the fish that are hanging in those cracks. It's just a good example of what's in front of you versus what's down. So that's the difference in clarity. It's still not bad in terms of the clarity in that 15 meter range in front of you, but as you can see directly below you, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yep. And another good illustration of what we were talking about earlier. Someone asked a question about whether you put in a few casts, even if you can't see fish on the sounder. Lots of good reasons why you should do that. So
this is much of the same, just a little bit different scenario. Golden perch directly underneath you, a nice big tree. So in this tree, there are actually a school of golden perch that you can barely see, I only know where they are because I saw them come out, but about 1.5 meters below that golden perch, which is furthest away from you in front of you, there are actually a couple of golden perch that are holding nice and tight in on that structure. So they're hard to see because they merge in, but as soon as they start to move off, they appear as those other 2 golden perch do. Again, same sort of thing, so we won't harp on it, but that's just another example of what we've just discussed. And yet again, these fish are right in tight against the tree, but the difference is you've got one fish that's really close to the tree that if you didn't know better, that you would think that that would be just a thicker branch, but it's actually fish sitting within the tree. Fish sitting on top of the tree, fish sitting in the trees at 10 meters versus fish sitting directly underneath you. So you've got that tree which has 1, 2, 3 fish on it. So those bigger highlights are the fish that are hovering in on that tree. So yeah, understanding that yes, they may be harder to spot, but they're still quite easy to spot in terms of contrast. And what we have here is shallower water, and we have a nice big fish sitting about 3.5 meters in front, but it's not sitting perfectly in the beam, so it looks more like a blob. But this fish was quite large and in charge, and you've also got directly underneath the boat a lay down or a bit of tree that got stuck when it was washed in. So you've got a vertical tree and you've got a nice big V that's stuck in there. So you can clearly identify the changes in just different trees. So this is one where the fish is not making itself very clear. It's hiding in on the bottom. I haven't got the beam perfectly on it, but with obviously fishing so much, I know that this is a nice big Murray cod that's holding tight on the bottom off a bit of structure. So that's what it appears in the not the best scenario. Often you see a lot of things in the best case scenario, but what I'm showing you here is some of the things that you do need to know, especially when you're not pointing the beam directly at that fish, or if that fish is sitting slightly off the center of the beam. And this is just a really good indication of a Murray cod, big Murray cod directly underneath the boat. You can make out the fish shape here, but it's really sitting tight on the bottom. So you need to really, again, the general rule is look for separation, but just because there is separation or no separation doesn't mean that it's not a fish. So if that fish moved just another ½ meter to the bottom, it would look like just a little hump on the bottom, but it's in fact a very big fish just emerged. So this is the down view. So the down view of a nice big fish sitting out slightly from the center of the beam. Again, it does appear a little bit blobby, but again, it's just not sitting perfectly within that beam. And again, it also depends on the type of structure. So this structure is not very clean. It's really spindly. So that's why it's not coming up as solid. So if these were a larger gum tree in places like Lake Burrinjuck, for example, it would be really, really contrasting. So just because you can see something that's a little bit blurry doesn't mean the image is blurry. It just means that the particular structure that you're shooting at is not a solid structure. And this is the down view of an absolute pearler of a snag. And you can see straight away the difference with this view versus the previous screenshot on the definition. So this is very close to the actual previous screenshot taken, but this is of a very substantial gum tree. So you can see how clear that's coming up on the down view as well. Again, this is in between something that's got a little bit of hardness to it, but it's still a little bit, grainy, but that's due to the actual style of the tree. This is a great depiction of a very solid golden perch directly underneath the boat, and you can see the separation, the clear separation of that actual pectoral fin there. So you can, it just shows the definition. And again, those fish are moving quite quickly most of the time, so you're not going to get the perfect readings every time, but that's just a good example of the separation you need to look for. And this is an absolute perfect scenario of where, again, you've got these trees which aren't that substantial, so they do appear a little bit blurry, but directly underneath that, there's 3 golden perch tucked in really tight towards the bottom. And you can see there that they actually hold a little bit more contrast in that tree that it's sitting on. And yeah, just something you need to look for. That's a perfect depiction of fish holding the bottom and not so clear of a reading.
Nope. You see if I can get control of my mouse wheel here. There we go.
Cool. So this is a tree directly underneath the boat. You do have a very small fish just about the 5 meter mark in front of you. Not a real clear depiction of that. So it basically looks like a bit of a rice grain. But out in 15 meters in front on the bottom, you've got a really big fish just holding behind that bit of structure. Again, not perfectly within the beam at the right angle. So it's going to appear like a blob, but guarantee you, if that fish starts moving in towards you or you move closer to it, it's going to appear as a nice fish shape if it's in the beam perfectly.
And again, one of the great things about the active target, isn't it? Because, previously you wouldn't have known whether that was a fish. Once you've put the active target on it, if it moves, you can see that movement, you can see the shape of the fish, and suddenly you can be, pretty confident of what you're casting at.
Exactly. And this is the forward view of that snag, that really nice gum tree that was on the down view. You can see here that this is just an absolute perler of a screenshot. Not only have you got that definition in the tree, but have a look directly on the bottom there. You see the shadow? It's casting quite a big shadow. Just the same as when you're out in the moonlight at night time and you've got a light pole and you've got a really big shadow cast. It's the same principle. So even with active target, just like your side scan, these shadows are your friend as well. So do have a look for those shadow markers too. And this is just a screen grab of the depth and the side panel. So obviously you have a side panel with your active target. So this is more just to give you an example of what I run. So I've got A2 contrast, which is an auto A2. For me, where I'm fishing, that's an absolute perfect color palette and contrast for the waterway that I'm fishing. You've got a fish suspended up high. 9 times out of 10, these fish are not going to be the ones that you want to target. On the off chance I have actually caught these fish. But like I said before, with my application vertical, generally the fish that are on the bottom are the ones that I target. So I would give this fish a drop, but if I don't get the reaction in the first drop or two, I'll just move on. So what we have here is a long shot of a fish just coming into the beam. So if you look directly underneath the 21.3, 3/4 of the way to the bottom, there's a fish that's just appearing. So it's hard to make out, but it's there. But if we go backtrack to that tree right there, directly at about 5 meters, 3/4 of the way down to the bottom, you've got a fish holding just off that structure. So there's a golden perch just hiding in nice and tight. So just being aware that you still need to really decipher the tree, come in on different angles, try and understand how big that fish is, because that could be quite a big fish just turned on the incorrect angle in towards the beam. That's a little bit of a closer shot of that, but again, same scenario. What we have here is a school of 3 golden perch. There are fish on the bottom that you can't see, and then you've got a whole school of redfin perch coming up from about your 15 meter mark to your 20 meter mark. So even your small redfin, and these were actually quite small, you still got that clear indication that they are schooled fish that are 20 meters away. This is actually one of my most recent captures, and this was a very, very solid fish. Again, I don't think I've actually posted this photo, but there you go. There's an exclusive, but that's one of the most recent fish that I caught not too long ago, utilizing the Rapala Rip and Wrap and utilizing the active target.
Mate, Scott Stewart, I'm going to bring the question up while we're here. Scott Stewart's asked whether you've used the active target at night and whether you think there's any difference in behaviour of the fish that you can detect using active target during the night.
I've been quite limited to where I can fish during this period, so I haven't fished nighttime. Waterways that I fish aren't generally open at nighttime, but I do have some good mates that are fishing Burrinjuck at nighttime, and yes, it is the behaviours in the fish, like Murray cod in general, especially in heavily pressured waters, they do feed a lot more freely at nighttime and are not nocturnal hunters. So yeah, they're noticing a lot more aggression in the cod, and like I was alluding to before, you cast, drop your lure, see that first reaction of the cod, you generally see these fish just start honing in a lot more in the dark, no question.
Yeah, great question, Scott. Let's go back to our slideshow.
Okay, so what I've been really focusing on as well is finding really obscure structures sitting on structure. So this is just a perfect example of an area that I would target. And within that tree, that vertical tree, you can see that there's a few more highlights. There's 3 highlights at approximately 2.5 meters, and they're redfin holding in that tree. And then you've got a couple, or one bigger blob, so to speak, at about 3.2 meters. And that's a nice golden perch sitting within that. But being able to pick up that detail is just invaluable when you're trying to target, really, spooky fish, or try and find, unique bits of structure that other people may not be able to detect. That's just a perfect example of just that obscure bit of structure that fish will hold on. And this is a school of redfin perch swimming in, and there's bloody hundreds in there. And there's even more coming in from memory. So it's just, it's fantastic with this forward range and what you get to see those fish come in. This has got a bit of everything. So you've obviously got this in forward mode. You've got a lot of shadows from those trees that are sitting within the trees and caught up in there, but you've got a lot of fish that are hiding within here. So being able to decipher what's a snag versus the fish is really important, and that's what I've really picked up a lot with Active Target and its detail. This may look like a mess to you if you haven't actually utilized Active Target, but for me, this is just like a wonderland of structure and fish hiding within structure. This is an example of what a fish may look like up high in the tree. This is not a fish, this is a big log, and the minute changes, I think we've got another screenshot that might be coming up, or hopefully it's in the right order. There you have it. It's actually a very big laydown that's actually laying down in the top of the tree. So minute changes in that transducer and turning it, just because you can think that you see a fish, just continually turn that handle on that transducer or that pole and really get a good view, because you can get a little bit confused sometimes and get excited when you see that contrast. A lot of the times it's not what you think it is, but just go that extra step just to scan around.
That one could be the Loch Ness Monster, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it for the slide deck.
Well, I mean, there's so much more we can talk about, but we're here for questions, so please give us your questions. No doubt we'll do something in the future again, but throw us anything you've got Active Target-wise.
Here's your chance, guys, because we're out of slides, we're out of videos. I'm sure Romen has probably got a few thousand more stashed away somewhere, but we're not going to load them up tonight. So if you don't ask questions, we're going to start to bring this to a close. If you ask questions, we're happy to stay here for as long as you keep asking questions. So we'll keep plugging away, chatting as we go. So some really good questions, by the way, along the way. And it doesn't have to be sonar; it can be more about the fishing. If you want to ask questions about the fishing as well, I've got one for you, mate. I want to talk to you about cod fishing in the winter, mate. We're heading into those really cold months. And, when I was a kid, cod fishing was a summer pursuit. These days, it's very much a winter pursuit, or very much a winter option at least. Tell us about how differently the cod behave during the cooler months than in the warmer months. Do you see that on your sonar at all? You haven't had the active sonar for all of summer, obviously, but...
Well, look, that's one of the points that I actually wanted to touch on, so thanks for reminding me. But I'm really excited to hone in on what we think happens in winter, because I haven't had this in a winter period in terms of Active Target and this detail. But traditionally, fish slow down. That's a given. They do either pair up, or they go and sun themselves on the bank to get that warmth. So it really depends on where you're targeting them. It might be a little bit different up in Queensland, where it doesn't get as cold as down here. But for us here, if we stick locally, fish will move up onto the bank and sun themselves for a bit longer. Doesn't mean they're going to sit there all day. Fish can move into the deeper water once the sun comes up. And targeting them when they're a little bit more still might actually be a lot easier. So I'm interested to see how the fish movements change in winter, but I've got a feeling that my preconceptions would be a little bit wrong to a degree, because I'm seeing a lot of movement currently in the last few weeks of fish that just aren't sitting still, and it's making it very hard to target them because they're continuously moving in and out of that beam. And like I alluded to before, you have to be really switched on to get these fish to bite, and you sometimes have 5 seconds to get your lure down to them. So hopefully they're sitting a little bit more dormant, but the question is, are they going to want to bite? So if you're fishing that shallower stuff, you want to have a bigger presence. So swim baits are a fantastic example of that. Even just working your lipless crankbaits up and down the shallows, keeping that lure in the fish's face. The key is catching them when they're on the bank sunning themselves, because that's the prime opportunity to get them when they're a little bit active or a little bit aggro or feeding.
Excellent. All right, we've got a couple of comments or questions that have come up here. So Paul Langley's made the comment, having the taskbar on the left auto hide similar to the menu bar would be awesome. So hopefully the Lowrance guys are listening to that, and maybe that might be something that comes up in future. Andrew's got a question about tilting the pole sideways slightly. So you've done this a few times in your videos. What does it achieve, mate? What's the purpose of tilting the pole?
Well, as I'm fishing, I'm gauging what's going on. So the purpose of tilting the pole either sideways or forward or down or any direction, it really depends on the level of your boat. So if you've got a boat that's not so stable, or you've got two people standing on one side of the boat, you're going to change the angle as well. So you want to be able to understand how your boat moves in relation to where your pole's sitting, because those minute changes can often affect what you're viewing. So what I've seen a lot of when people have been posting what's wrong with my active target is they're missing a slither of the beam directly underneath the boat, but that's simply because that their transducer is not lined up correctly in terms of the relation to the water level on their boat. So those minute changes are the things that I'm talking about when you constantly have to be moving the pole. So it's not as easy as it seems when you see a 2-minute clip or a 30-second clip of someone catching a fish. There's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, it's a great question, and one that I did forget about. So thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you, Andrew. A question from Matthew about what your most productive time of day is to fish for cod. I can tell you exactly what it is, mate. I can tell you what the most productive time is when I go fishing. It's always an hour before I get there or 3 hours after I leave. They're the best times to fish. But what about you, Roman?
Oh, mate, I don't get the luxury of going out 3 times a week or 4 times a week like I used to. I'm lucky to get out once a weekend or once every fortnight these days. So I'm pretty much just maximizing my chances. Anywhere that you fish, you can have bite windows. So I prefer to be on the water all day if possible, and really focus on those Saluna tables, the bite time windows of the almanac. And it's, again, it relates to different waterways, different in percentage wise, but for me it's just being out there, having my lure in the water, understanding what I'm seeing on my sonar, whether that be my 2D, my live sonar or whatnot, being able to gain that knowledge of those fish prior to understanding my technology is probably the biggest thing that I would tell people. Understand the fish, and then you have the different layers of technology which can help you in determining whether that fish is ready to bite or not.
One thing's for sure is you're not going to get a bite when you're sitting at home on the couch, so spend every minute you can out there.
Exactly right.
All right. We've got another question from Dave. He's asking whether the active sounder, the live target, the active target, let me get it right, is changing the way you work your lures.
Well, the last 5 to 7 years I've been doing a lot of vertical stuff. So I have been trialing a lot of things. It's more so confirming what I already suspected, but it does change it in terms of if I notice there's a fish and it's following me, and I can see that detail in how I'm twitching my lure or where that fish is swimming to, where I can cast to next. Yes, it definitely does help with changing my technique, and I've displayed that on a lot of the videos of late, where I spend a lot of time on that particular fish, and it may be 10, 15 minutes to catch that one golden perch, but I love the thrill of being able to trick them it doesn't mean that I have to catch the biggest fish or the most fish, but I get the satisfaction of actually tricking that fish, especially
like
when
to get
people
the
say,
most
"Oh, you
stubborn
can't
one.
catch it." Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
does help, and time on the water is going to, help you more.
Yeah, cool. So another question from Eric: how deep should active target transducer be from your boat?
Not deep at all. So the way that I go about it is, I think my pole is about 140 centimeters in length, might be a touch shorter, but I essentially just have it so it's low enough to shoot underneath the hull if I'm going on the other side of the boat. So I don't need to worry too much about moving my transducer pole to another side of the boat, because it shoots so well directly underneath the boat, and you don't need much water. You don't need much length to get it there.
Yeah, cool. So, a question from Katie about installation of your gear. So, can someone post a video of how they mount and run cables on a skeeter? Has tried many times, but none show how to connect. Is that something that you've had any experience with, Roman, or anyone else perhaps that might have had some experience with that would like to post a comment?
If somebody wants to give me a skeeter so I can go through a whole install of all the electronics, I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah,
But there are some
you have
bass
to wait in
boys.
line behind me.
There's some bass boys that have been installing active target of late that do have those bigger boats, so that's potentially something that they may do. A lot of the people that fish the AYC tournaments do have those bigger boats, so maybe that's a question to ask for someone that who has a bigger boat.
It could also be a question to pose of either Nick White or Steve Galvin or someone like that who does a lot of installations and knows that side of things back to front, or Matt Hooper at Lowrance Simrad as well. So, all right, we seem to be running out of questions, mate. I've got another one just to keep us going just a little bit longer, to give our viewers just a couple more minutes to post their last question. So it's last call, guys. This next round of questions will be the last, and we'll close it out. My question, though, is about the thermocline, mate, and how that shows up on the active target sonar. So, again, you may not have had the opportunity really to have a look at that, given the timing of when the thing came. And, it was kind of heading into that sort of late autumn period when the thermocline may have disappeared anyway. But what do you think? Is it going to come up? Are you going to be able to see it on the active target, or is it going to be useful for that? Or
No question.
I can't envisage it at all.
No question. I mean, you're picking up those individual bubble trails. You're picking up that line knot. You're picking up all that sort of stuff. So it definitely will show up. And the last few trips, actually, the thermocline has been in about 8 meters, and I have noticed it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's so delicate in what it can pick up that there's no doubt about it.
Excuse me. Sorry, folks. Yeah, and look, that was really, really clearly demonstrated when you showed that video where you couldn't see the fluorocarbon. You know, the fluorocarbon, the density of the fluorocarbon, the refractive index of the fluorocarbon is so close to water that even sonar can't pick it up. And it just demonstrates how sensitive it is to density changes. So, yeah, cool.
The one thing that I will touch on as well is, active target, general sonar, the technology in the sounders these days, because you need a sounder to run this sort of stuff, you need to make sure that it's updated. So a lot of the issues that I find, or people come to me or I've heard of little glitches that might be happening or little bugs here and there, they're the stuff that gets rectified in the regular updates. It might be 3 months or 6 months, but there are updates. So make sure that you're constantly updating your system, because things might come up in a few months where it might throw something out of whack. So make sure that's your first port of call before you actually try and call up and get some assistance, because a lot of the times those little things and downloads and updates will fix that. So same thing with active target.
Yeah. Save yourself a lot of time and trouble by checking that first. It's a very easy thing to do. We've got a question that's come up, mate, from Clint about what battery setup you're using for your units and AT.
Sure. So I've got a bit of a convoluted setup in my boat. I've got a 385 edge tracker. I've got a 10 horsepower electric Torpedo as well, and then I've got my Lowrance Ghost at the front electric motor. I've got 2 HDS 12s. I've got my active target. I've got my USB plugs. I've got my live well. I've got a whole thing going on in my boat. So just in a quick snapshot, I've got a 75 amp hour lithium, which runs my HDS12, my active target, and my NEMA network. And then I've got a 24 volt setup for my Ghost motor, and it's just AGM 24 volt setup. And I've got a 12 volt reducer as well. So that 12 volt reducer will run my other HDS12, all my other USB chargers, my live well, everything on my switch panel, my lights, and then the 24 volt, which runs the Ghost. So I don't get a lot of interference at all, if any, on my setup, but I've probably got a boat that's probably prone to a lot of interference. So I think I've got lucky on that aspect, but it's just the trial and error. So I've got AGMs, Torpedo lithiums for the 10 horsepower, and then I've also got a little lithium to run independent sounder and active target NEMA network.
Yeah, cool. And Roman, is it true that you're considering installing a small nuclear reactor on your boat to power all that stuff? Because if you add another electronic device, you're not going to be able to power it from batteries anymore?
Pretty much, and that's probably honestly what's stopping me getting the 16s, because they draw a lot more power.
They do. It takes a bit to run those big LCD screens. Hey, Roman, we're out of questions. I want to thank everybody who's come along and asked some great questions tonight. It's been a really good session. I've really enjoyed it. I know a lot of our viewers have learnt a lot along the way as well. So thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, for being here for almost 2 hours as we roll through looking at slides and looking at videos and learning how to use this great new technology. So really appreciate you coming along, mate, and sharing your knowledge. And thank you again to everybody who's come along today and been part of it and asked some great questions along the way as well. So we're going to round it up and say goodnight. Any last thoughts, Roman? Any last tip you could leave us with before we close the session out?
I think the main thing is, I think the main thing is, a lot more active target units are coming into the country, so you're going to get a lot more people putting the word out there, showing the footage. So just really have a keen eye on what's going to happen in the next few months. And into springtime, it's going to be an absolute ball with the golden perch and the redfin perch, and the Murray cod can hopefully get a rest. And you'll see a lot more action. So have a look. I know Social Fishing Reese Creed is doing some great stuff with active target. So if you want to go see some of his stuff, go have a look. There's going to be plenty out there. I'll be posting a heap of stuff myself. Obviously, we'll do more of this stuff in the future. Have any questions, fling me a message on my page. I'll try and answer it or steer you in the right direction. And again, just thank you for everybody who's joining in, asking all these questions. It's something that I'm really passionate about, the electronic side. And it's really, really exciting times with active target and the live sonar space. Yeah.
And I have to say, mate, you're obviously an early adopter. You've picked this technology up and you've run with it, perhaps more than most people who are out there and using the stuff. But you're not only using the stuff, but you've spent an enormous amount of time recording video, recording screenshots, and to have that amount of information, all that stuff that we can put up on the screen and talk about and show people exactly what's going on, that's a tremendous asset. So thanks for your efforts in putting all that together. So, folks, we're going to leave you now and say goodnight, but we're going to do this all again in another month. They're going to become monthly events rather than fortnightly. So July the 5th will be the next masterclass that we run. It's going to be with Dean Sylvester. We're going to be talking Empowerment Barramundi. So make sure you put that in your diary and come along and have a listen to that one as well and ask some questions of Dean. We'll put up some I'll put up a placeholder on YouTube so you can subscribe to the Doc Lewis YouTube channel and get a notification when you can come along and listen to that one as well. So Roman, to you, thanks once again and good night. To everybody out there, thank you. It's been a great session. Look forward to doing it again.
See you all.